Welcome to LSC. It's Sportstime. I'm your host, Bob Hintz. Today I have with me Carl Francis, who is Director of Communications for the NFL Players Association. Welcome.
Thank you. Welcome. I feel good to be here, Bob.
Well, I'm glad to have you back in it. But we want to talk about the camp.
Sure.
Because this is something that you and Vern Lee, well, you actually come up with the idea,
Right.
calling them in California in
Yeah.
16 years.
16 years.
Talk a little bit about the camp, what you're trying to do, and we'll just talk about the camp.
Well, look, it's no different than the idea, the origination of the idea, and just in terms of why we wanted to do the camp.
Right.
Growing up as a youngster here in the Hampton Roads area, particularly Hampton, Virginia, you know, I've always looked up to the Sean Gales, Al Toombs, and Dwight Stevensons, but you know, for some reason, I never could find a camp where those pros would be, where I can become more motivated, maybe become better academically, and just be, you know, led in a positive direction by some of the pros
and
from the area.
hear what their experiences are
no
that
question.
sort of thing.
So by me being in this position, I had access to the Reggie Langhorns and all the different athletes in the area, including Sean Gale, Terry Kirby. So I said, you know, let me do my part in being in this position by bringing a free camp back to the area and trying to make a difference in helping, you know, just motivate some kids become better people through football.
Did you have any problem with getting the athletes from this area to work your camps?
No, not at all, because it's the first time. And they had never been approached by anyone to do a camp. A couple of them had said, you know, I had thought about doing a camp, but I understand how busy, players' off seasons are with the families and traveling. It's hard to find people to kind of trust to help build a camp. But for me, it was very simple. You know, by my experience with the NFLPA and me coming down and putting it all together and really being able to call them and invite them, and especially when they found that it was free. I mean, it was a no-brainer for all of them.
Right. Talk a little bit about the ability of these kids coming back in, and I call them kids and they're grown men, but to be able to relate to these youngsters. That had to really be one of the things that you wanted them to do because they're from this area.
Well, you have to understand, we don't have an NFL team. So on most Friday nights, they are the heroes of the young people in the youth leagues.
Right.
So the youth league kids go to Darling Stadium, Todd Stadium, and look up to tomorrow's great players. So, you know, before there was maybe Gus Ferrata, Heath Miller, or whatever Redskin quarterback, or even RG3 now, you know, Michael Vick played in Todd Stadium.
Right.
You know, you could see the greatness as a 10th grader, or even as a 9th grader with Ferguson High School. And even with Ronald Carey, you saw something special. So those kids rushed to those stadiums on Friday night to see the next best greats out of this area. So for us, that's what a lot of the kids chase.
Right.
So when they come to the camp, they see the pros who
they come through the system,
and they're like, man, those are the people that I want to emulate and I want to be like one day, so let me listen to what they have to say. Maybe I can get some tips on how to become a better player.
Talk a little bit about your dad and Vernon Lee's dad, because you kind of bounced it off of them on 16 years ago.
You know what, you know, my dad, he's a historian when it comes to, as well as Vernon dad. He's played, you know, collegiately, he's coached, and my dad attended Hampton Public Schools, and he was into sports himself. And one of the things my dad, I know for myself, instilled history in me. I mean, that's why today, two of the people I talk to at least once a month is Walter Bowser and Leroy. I'm sorry, I'm going on a blank.
Keys?
Leroy Keys, I'm sorry. Leroy Keys.
I'll help you out when I can.
Thank you so much. And look, you can't get no deeper in history.
No, you can't.
Than those two. And me and Leroy, we talk all the time. Me and Walter Bowser, we talk all the time. And every time I talk to them, the one thing I found out about them is, as much as people talk about them as players in their era, they're always talking about other great players. The Raymond Pollards, the other great athletes from that era.
Right.
So when you think about where you are today, you say to yourself, man, no wonder football really dominates this area, because of the history of those players and people chasing those players. I mean, I can't have a conversation with Alvis Mann without bringing up Leroy Keys and how great he is. I mean, there's not even a discussion about Ronald, Michael Vick, or Allen Iverson without bringing up Leroy Keys.
Right.
So for me, that's where that's where the history begins, and he's bringing us all these other players. So having that history really gives you a foundation.
Well, see, you kind of answering my next question, because I was going to talk about the 757 area, but
Right.
you're talking history and tradition and all. But we developed so many great ball players, and I'm not just talking football. I'm football, basketball, baseball from this area.
Right.
You know.
I mean, it's like I said. I think it's a kind of a pod of tradition from generation to generation, and every generation is chasing next to say, I want to be better than. You know, you have Dwight Holly, right, at Kickertan. He goes on to North Carolina, becomes all-time leading tackler in North Carolina history. Then he goes to the Dolphins, Colts. Then you have Gerard Mayo, NFL Defensive Rookie of the Year. Now, Gerard Mayo was a really good player here in Kickertan, but most people, I don't think a lot of people really knew who he was until he got to Tennessee and he left early.
Right.
And now he's Rookie Defensive Player of the Year, just signed a great contract, and now he's one of Bill Belichick's leaders.
Right.
And the kids need to know who Gerard Mayo is.
Well, and see, when I talked to Gerard, he was talking about the ones that he looked up to, the Junior Seau's, the Brewskis, and, so everybody takes from other people, and they don't really take. You learn from these kids, and you get the feeling of the tradition and all that.
Absolutely.
This camp that you've got, you're going to have, about 500 kids come in?
Yes, over 2 days.
Over 2 days. So you're not talking just giving them football, but you're also talking about life skills.
Absolutely. I think me and Coach Tomlin, Mike, we talk like once a month, and we just talk about, as a matter of fact, we meet at the Combine. Him, myself, and Morocco Brown, who's the director, player personnel with the Redskins, and we always talk about the history, like what is it we can instill in the kids from the area this year. And I know, I remember one year there was an HBO special on gangs and football players, and it was kind of centered around the Hampton Roads area, where a lot of the gangs had recruited football players, and we thought that was so odd and unique that we needed to address that. So Mike and myself came up with this whole theme of the camp, where we would talk about gangs and football. What's the makeup? How did it get here? And it was such a great session that it got really emotional for a lot of the kids, because it was very sensitive, and it touched a lot of kids because they had been approached by gangs. And they were concerned because here they are, they want to play football, they want to get in a football scholarship, but now they have gang members pulling on them. And see, that had never happened before.
Right. Well, and that's that peer pressure.
Right, that's the peer pressure that exists. But we gave them some simple tools of success and some simple tools of survival that they could use in order to, continue to, get through the system. And develop themselves and use football as a way to get out of a negative environment. And I think it was one of the greatest sessions we've had since the camp.
Now, are you doing this as an ongoing thing? Every year you talk, but there are other things you talk too about besides that the gang.
Well, every year it's a theme. It's a different theme.
What's the theme this year?
The theme this year is about leadership.
Okay.
Because we want to instill some sort of leadership, whether you are the best player of the team, or you're the player that does everything right academically, socially, in your community, whether you volunteer, things like that. So leadership is going to be the key theme for this year's camp.
Okay. Well, and see, that's so important, because you can be a leader and not be the most vocal.
Absolutely. No, you can't.
A lot of people don't understand. They think because this guy's vocal, he's the leader. But you can be a leader by example.
Example is key. And for us, that's what we want to instill, because we understand the kids that we have at the camp, we all know that we know the percentages. We know how to operate. But we do know also there's a large percentage of those kids who want to go to college, whether they're going as a walk-on, scholarship, Division 1, 2, 3, or whatever. But in your development through that process, you can develop leadership skills that can take you beyond football into the work world and developing your own business and coming back and being able to give back to the kids in other ways in the area. And using football as that guide to attract kids to instill these disciplines.
Right. So when these kids, and you see a lot of these guys that have gone through this camp, like Tyrod Taylor, for example, that are now successful in the NFL, but you've got kids that's gone through the camp, I'm sure that they're successful, not necessarily in sports.
You know what? And it's funny, Vernon and I, doing this over 16 years, and we've seen kids come and go. We've touched over maybe 5,000 kids. And it's funny when you're walking through the community or you're at an event, or I come home for a high school game on Friday nights, and it's always good to have a young man tap you on your shoulder and say, "Excuse me, sir, do you run the All-Star football camp at Christopher Newport?" I say, "Yes." "Hey, I want to say I had a great time. Thank you so much. Now I am a director at a different company in Northern Virginia, or director here in Taiwood area." And I'm saying, wow, you really don't expect that. But that's why you do it. You don't do it to have a kid say, now I'm the MVP of the National Football League, and thank you for what you did for me. It's all the other kids, all the other elements that come along with it.
And a good example of that is Jerry Holmes.
Absolutely.
Now, Jerry Holmes played basketball for me when I coached over Buffalo.
Oh, really?
And today he calls me coach.
Right.
And there's there's no value you can put on that. And I remember when I had him in there, and I said, "When did you know that you could win?" He says, "When I shut down Swan, because Swan didn't know that he was going against me, Kozlowski, Coach Hintz," and he just started naming all the coaches. He wasn't just going against me.
Right.
I said, what a way to think about all the people that have helped you and little things that you've learned from them, and that's what's happening to you.
Absolutely. And it's funny then you mentioned Jerry, looking at you as a coach. Coach Kozlowski, he comes out every year. And it's so weird being around him now, because you always feel as though in a moment's notice he's going to say, "Okay, time to stretch." I mean, if he were to just say that, I'll probably go running and get stretched. And I'm like, wait a minute, I got to relax, because I'm not in that mode. But, it's funny how important high school youth coaches are. And sometimes I don't think they really know. I think some of the older ones know, ones that have coached a long time, but some of the younger ones really don't know the appeal, the impact they have on a young person's life. Not Tyrod Taylor. Tyrod Taylor is special. He's blessed. He has unbelievable talent. But we're talking about other kids that are in the football program that are watching, kids that may not be stars, that may not be starters, but kids that are saying, wow, being around Coach Smith, he's unbelievable. His presence and the things he says, the little quotes he uses, man, I can use that to get me through college and allow me to be successful one day. And that's the impact. The impact is not the guys that go on to the NFL. It's the impact of all the other guys that come back and say, "Hey, Coach, I remember when you said this. It changed my life."
Well, and see, I can't tell you how many people I've had in here who are in the business world who said how much they've taken from sports, whether it be time management, discipline, whatever it is, that they're able to use. And Kevin Swan's a good example.
Oh, absolutely.
He's a preacher.
Absolutely.
And he says, you got to have a playbook. He says, I do. It's called the Bible. He says, you got to have a coach. He says, I do. It's called God. So everything he does in his preaching falls right back into sports, but he's able to use that and touch these young kids.
Absolutely. And Kevin's a great friend of mine. I've been knowing Kevin for a long time, and his story is remarkable. I mean, when you talk to kids, even including my son, we were driving home one camp, and Kevin came and spoke to the kids after the camp, and I had to give them a whole story about Kevin Swan. Like, hey, I know you like Allen Iverson, and that's okay. But Kevin Swan, he has a story too.
And he was before Allen.
And he was before Allen. So just understand that, hey, everybody you meet has a story. And so.
Well, this camp you've got a lot of kids coming back in to help you. You end up with what, about 14, 15, 16 NFL players come back? Is that about
we
right?
have about, depending on the schedules, we usually have about anywhere from 12 to 14 players come back, and they're always, more than welcome. They're over excited about it, and and including former players. I mean, we don't exclude guys because they transition out. Like a guy like Ronald Curry, or a guy like Elton Brown, Marcus Hagans,
or Brooks,
Aaron Brooks for sure. These guys, because it's the history. And then I try to bring a connection between the guys, the players who are in the league now, and the former players who recently retired, like the David Macklins. I mean, because they can serve as somewhat of a connection as to how to get through the process of being an NFL player and being from the 757 area.
Well, I tell you, when you and Vernon have such a passion and a love for this, it comes out, and that's why your camp is so successful.
Yeah, we love the kids and we love the area, and as long as I'm able to do it, I'll always be here bringing back this great event for the area.
Well, I just wish I'd see you more than just once a year.
I know. We'll try. Hey, we'll try to get better in that area.
Thanks for tuning in to LSC and Sports Time. I want to thank my special guest, Carl Francis. I'm your host, Bob Hintz. Till next time.